It's starting. It's loading. Tiny little broken window. Excellent connection. I don't see a video though. Do it again. Excellent connection. Aha, there we go. Copy video URL. Looks like it's working. Ye old-fashioned red circle. Red car. Red circle. I should be red car. Live on the YouTube. Okay, so that'll be on here, and this will be stream notifications. Bonk. I think that'll work. And then I should have OBS chat. Should be able to chat in OBS chat. I don't think I'll need my browser open. Okay, so then this open and available should we need it. I have this open and available should we need it. Yup. Hello, how you doing, Raid? Eternal Raid. Never know which one my brain is going to choose. I should probably be logged in on Chrome as well. Let me grab github.com. Copy password, sign in. Authentication code, send me a message, I guess. Hubba da boop doop. Just in case we need to, here is the issue from forever ago that I'm referring to in the description. 4 years ago, 4 years and a month ago, I was like, hey, yo, I want to add 3D to OS. Here's all the things I think need to happen. And he's like, yeah, here's my idea. It's roughly the same, but more, you know. Authentication code leaked SMH. Oh my god, you're right. So there's a bunch of information here. It's old as hell. This is all 4-year-old information. And then there was an update a year later because I didn't really get very far with it, with somebody who did this in VR. We don't need all the VR stuff, but this eventually got published to their GitHub, to Flutter Issues GitHub. And we're probably going to port over a lot of what was done for the VR port here. That is, hasn't been touched in a few years, so it's probably not kept up very well with the current OS framework. But we have access to the source code. I asked 2.5 years ago, basically, followed up with, hey, I think I want to work on this. Has anything changed? No, this is all good. And then I worked on it for a little bit longer. If you go to I have a branch over here where I tried to work on this again, like 2 years ago. This one started 5 years ago. And I guess I never published any of my updates to it. Wow. So yeah, 4 years ago were my last commits. We're going to try to pick this back up. I have this master branch all up to date. I have a new branch based on the name of this issue that's still open, ready to go. I've got the source code to the VR 3D stuff. I want to support some 4-year-old issues that no one taken a look at in forever. What are you going to work on? Clang? Yeah. Does this get any bigger if I do this? Not really, but it's slightly easier to read. Okay. So, right. And for context, if nobody has heard me ramble about it in the Discord, I used to work on rhythm games a lot, and I built a rhythm game with ads. Oh, never put ads in your rhythm game, boys. Rhythm game, dismiss, go away. That's theater mode, that's fine. Based on sound voltex, which I can show you later. There's no audio. There's the audio. Probably way too loud. We'll turn that the hell down. But it's think DJ Hero, if you've ever seen that, where you get to add effects to the song. But it's a bunch of Japanese electronic shit, basically. Based on Sound Voltex. I just do this. This should give me some life. 666 is still the big popular. We're going to try to recreate this eventually. Not today. This is going to be a long-ass thing. C# functions not virtual by default. They are not. Which is better, honestly. Much better than virtual by default with Java, for example. So this is why we need 3D support. OS is a great rhythm game framework. Does not have support for 3D objects. It's all 2D. So that was, again, the point of, hey, let's add 3D so people can build game modes like that. And if you're thinking, like, OS is just the clicky circle game, why would you ever need the 3D stuff? I don't have actual OS pulled up here. Duplicate. Regular ass OS. We'll use mine. That's fine. Regular ass OS has a bunch of rule sets, they're called. So, like, the built-in ones are still regular ass OS. But there's also Taiko, the drum one, there's Mania, the key one, and there's Catch, which is really not a rhythm game, it's just catch a bunch of falling fruit. But it's been in the game for forever, whatever. And there's also, somewhere on here, a list of rule sets. So, rule sets, custom rule set directory. There are lots of custom rule sets, none of which really make use of 3D to my knowledge, because it's not supported. So until we have more defined, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you can add more rule sets to the game, basically, and there's at least like a dozen that are honest, like actively enough worked on that they still work. I remember C# being a lot better than Java, but I don't remember it being this much better. C# is really good. Honestly, one thing that's worse than Java is programs written in it. Yeah, there's Microsoft problems. I've been rewriting the janky Minecraft code in Minecraft. 2 days, it's a pain. I bet. Minecarts still don't work. They have never worked. They still don't work. I can only imagine the code for them is exhausting. So, OS is written in C#. The framework is written in C#. Works on Linux. I can actually run the test runner here pretty easy. Do I have it in my history? The test runner that we're going to be building tests into is a graphical application here, which just has a variety of things set up to like automate visual testing in particular, but other things that are not visual, like there's a test here for just like, it's visualizing how the clock works, but the internals are actually, I'm almost certain, testing actual conditions on the code. Not all of these are purely visual. You can run automated tests on them. So I could set up a test thing here, like, let's see, circular. One of these has like multiple steps. This one, I don't understand like if it interacts with the real mouse. Maybe if I do, there it does. Okay. So there's my mouse cursor with a left and a right mouse button, right? Like you can have really neat tests in this. So I'll set it back to the test mouse cursor. And if I just hit run all steps, for example, it's going to go through every test defined, do a bunch of validation. If they're all green, then hey, it works. So we're going to end up building tests for 3D viewports and stuff. We're going to have to add models and shaders and all kinds of shit that support 3D, and we'll put in a couple of tests in here into the graphical test stuff. I haven't looked at this code basically in minimum 3 years, 2.5, I think. And it's been changing a lot. They named input priority after you. Wow! Yeah, my one issue, man. My one issue was so influential, they were like, that guy, he's going places. Okay, so we probably want to make sure we can put up a test first before we start writing a fuck ton of code. So, get into my uncomfortable sitting pose. We need to learn how tests work. Merge conflicts are going to be amazing. Well, I mean, no, because I'm not going back to the old code. I'm starting on a new branch and using this 3-year-old VR code as a base, and I'm going to try to write it to all of the modern standards and keep it not breaking and up to date as regularly as I can if necessary. So we're going to try to work in small increments. If I can get a 3D viewport and like a cube on the screen in a couple of weeks max, maybe that'll get merged into the framework and people can start working on it more. Yeah. So I'm going to get back into graphics programming, basically, which is going to take some time. So let's set up a test first. We want to do visual tests first, because I don't want to worry about automating anything. So in visual tests, I think the first thing I want is containers, because we need somewhere to put our little test cube. So within the container, we want a new file. Sure, make it a class. Why can't I just make it, because I'm in Solution Explorer view. Oh, that's why I can't make a new file like that. So we want it to be test scene to match all of the naming conventions currently, because I think these are all automatically pulled up. There's a Microsoft extension in C++ that uses a single for attributes. Seeing this now, I wonder if that's inspired by C# or the other way around. I don't know which came first. I think attributes have been in the language since 1.0, which would have been, what, give or take 2000? Just before, I think. But I don't know, because it's, I know C++ has the managed C++, which obviously takes a lot from C# because it's C++ running on .NET. But so I imagine that's where it would have come from. And then it got like pulled into a Microsoft extension to C++, period, maybe? I don't know. Test scene, what do we want to call our 3D viewport? Because we can just say container 3D as a root container node. That's fine. But what is the viewport? A scene? Because a viewport is just, you can have a viewport into a 2D scene. So if I call it viewport 3D, meh. Scene container is probably fine. Let's see. C++ CLI has been every feature under the sun. Yep. It may have started there. Visibility side and scroll container. So I mean scene container. I think in here he even said, hey, you could probably just call it a scene and it would act like the viewport and the children would be drawable 3Ds. But this was like not well designed. This was just, here's my thoughts. And then in the VR one, they don't even have, I don't think, a separate container other than container 3D, as far as I'm aware. Rendering maybe has one. Unrenderable. Interesting. We'll end up with a camera class that's very similar to this, probably. Shaders, transforms, vertices, drawable. Right, like there is a mesh renderer, which is probably going to be within a... Yeah, it's just going to be responsible for rendering a mesh. So, like, I don't think this VR one has quite the same level of flexibility that is going to be wanted eventually. And I can rename things later. It's not a terrible idea. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So we'll definitely want a container 3D. The viewport for the 3D scene will be a container 3D. There's going to be a lot of fucking inheritance. The OS framework is all inheritance, so we're going to live with that. And it works for what they need. So let's go back to new file, new class, new test scene. Now I don't want to call it scene because this is a test scene. Viewport container. We can call it a viewport 3D. How about that? A viewport 3D. Container. Viewport 3D could be a 3D container. A container 3D. Viewport 3D. Boom. Let's grab this over here so I can kind of follow there. I don't know if they've written new source with the old style. For now, I'm going to assume they don't, and I'm going to use the new style namespaces in C#. We're going to try not to overthink it too much. I think we'll leave nullable enabled for now. We may as well make it a partial class to match what they're doing. I don't know if that's necessary, but it might be. The scene needs to extend framework test scene, which... Okay, so then we want to put this in tests visual containers, which should give me framework test scene as well. Ooh, nearly knocked my water over. So how much of this is necessary? I don't know. Probably want a handle to whatever the debug config is. That looks like it might be important. This is probably something that's a test thing. I think for the purposes of this, actually, I will null disable. I'm just going to be copying a bunch of stuff that doesn't rely on nullability. Setup needs to schedule clear. Clear probably comes from the container. It does. So sure, we'll do the same thing. That makes sense. Then, God, it really does not. Fix formatting. Fix formatting. Format on paste. So we need setup, we need tear down, we need a bunch of tests. Setup and tear down. Okay, tear down steps, add toggle, disable front to back. I don't know what this does. We're just going to have a method for tear down. And then we can have a test function, which is just going to be like opaque box with whatever. Kind of similar naming to that. So test, public void test, opaque cube in 3D space. Or something like that. That'll be the test we're going to run. Render opaque interior, interesting. Create a blended box. So that's where the box is coming from. We can create a cube. Let's just have a private void create cube. We don't have a place to store the viewport yet. I'm assuming that puts the rest, yeah, it does. This was a few versions ago they did that. It's very nice, less indenting, which I normally don't care that much about, but in these kinds of languages you do it so much that you want the extra real estate. So to create their blended box, they make the child a thing, right? Which is good. I'm going to need to do that as well. So let's do the same. Setup action invoke. There's an optional setup step. Okay. Add step, create box. Okay. That works. So let's say action. We don't have a thing for this yet, actually, so we won't take anything there. But we want our child. So they're doing add step, create cube, which is then going to have this, which is fine. I just trying to follow their style. We want a child equal to a new, this is where we want to have our viewport 3D, like this, first. And then we'll take our setup action actually and just make it action, setup action, and we'll call it with nothing for now. Invoke. It'll eventually take in the cube. And we have a test box here. So we'll want to also have a test cube class, which I can go ahead and do. It won't have anything in it. Private partial class test cube can be a cube. We don't have a cube yet, get rid of that. So what we probably want to do is just make this a container. Hello, hi. You're not that late, we just started. You missed all the explanation of what the hell we're doing, but we have just started writing code, and not even good code, just trying to understand what we're going to need to write a test so that we can put things in here. So if I do this, we should be able to just say create cube, and we don't need an assert necessarily just yet. Right. Yeah, this should all be fine. So we'll have to do node stuff eventually, but otherwise all of this is fine. Okay, so we should just be able to compile and run this and see a new test that does basically nothing. So run tests. At least I'm assuming I did everything correctly to get this test to show up. It should be alphabetical, so viewport 3D, setup, create cube, nothing fails. All right, that sounds fun. Hello. So we have a test we can start putting things in. I don't understand shit, but I'm watching anyway to learn. Yep, I don't remember most of this shit. We're going to be copy-pasting a lot of things while we learn. Convert to blocked scope. Okay, so it does have a preference. We'll go ahead and do that. We're going to follow their preferences because we're adding to their project. We have a viewport 3D test scene, so we need to go create a 3D viewport. A viewport 3D. That is going to require a handful of things. So let's go back up to the framework into graphics containers. Our container is going to live here. What is internal for again? It's private, but to the project, not to the file or to the class. So internal works across your entire C# project and like anything inside of a DLL or an executable. It's not exported, but not private. Containers, so we want two things. We want a container 3D. Oh, we need a class container 3D, like that. We'll figure out what to put in here in a second. We'll also want a viewport 3D. Well, we need to make it a class first. I don't like being in this view. Convert and where's my container? Container. I don't know where any of my buttons are. Convert to here. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to quickly go take a look at the VR version and see what kind of things they've set up for us. So a container 3D has a drawable 3D, so we'll want to do that. Container 3D, they like making things partial even back then, so I think we'll keep partial for both of them. A container 3D of T needs to exist, so outside of containers, drawable is here. We want a new file class drawable 3D, which again we'll figure something out for in a second. Convert to thing. Drawable 3D. Probably needs an interface called iDrawable 3D. But again, we'll get to that in a second. We're worried right now about just getting a handful of types in place. So viewport 3D will be a container 3D. Container 3D, I'm in big mode, also needs a generic version, public partial class, the opposite of a generic version. Container 3D is a container 3D of drawable 3D. This is just the kind of thing that I know they do. This is a pattern that exists in the OS framework. If you don't care about the type, it handles all cases of drawable 3D. If you do, you select it with the generic type parameter here. So then we want where T is a drawable 3D, which again might become an interface, because I think we have an iDrawable. So we probably want an iDrawable 3D. But what this will let us do is come into viewport 3D. Viewport exists. Veldred viewport. Oh, right, they're using Veldred. New viewport 3D. Now, viewport 3D cannot implicitly convert a viewport 3D to a graphics drawable because did we not actually set up container? Yeah, we didn't set up container to do anything. A container needs to be a composite drawable, probably. I think I agree with that. Composite drawable should handle compositing to an actual texture, which is what we want to do when we're rendering the scene anyway. So let me validate that I'm correct on that as best I can. This is doing nothing I wouldn't expect, and composite drawable is... See, I wouldn't even know where to look for the thing, actually, but nothing here looks wrong. That's fine, that's fine. It's just a drawable 3D. I probably have to look at the composite draw node to know what it's doing for sure. Where does it create the composite draw node? Subtree modified description. There's no composite draw node here. composite drawable 3D is their own thing. Of course, I'll have to do that myself. So maybe, what do their test code look like? Am I understanding their hierarchy correctly? Let's go to the Solution Explorer, actually, because it might be easier to see the tests here. Tests, shaders, virtual reality. So composite visibility might help. Containers, a new container 3D, or the basic model. What does new protected do? Oh boy. Yeah, that one's interesting. Was that in container 3D? It was not. It was in composite, right? Composite, drawable 3D, new protected. So new here is a step beyond override. So this exists, internal child exists in drawable 3D somewhere. At least it should. I probably can't search for it because it's protected and this is only the public interface. But within drawable 3D, there is a virtual or not, doesn't matter, internal child. New says explicitly shadow this name if you have at least this type. It's name shadowing. Protected just happens to be the visibility modifier. You can new anything. So if you have a drawable 3D, internal child refers to drawable 3D's internal child. If you have a composite drawable 3D, internal child refers to this one instead. So in this case, what they're doing is internal child is of type drawable within, like, drawable probably inherits this unused member. This is partial. This is that part of the partial class. Let's just go drawable 3D. So drawable 3D is a composite drawable, and a composite drawable is a drawable, and that's going to have an internal child somewhere, right? So if the thing would be virtual, call this and not perform a virtual call. Kind of. If it were virtual, it wouldn't matter. The new refers to a new thing. So maybe you can't do it on a virtual thing, now that I think about it. Maybe you can. It's explicitly a different entity, basically. You can always refer to the previous one. It's not gone. And it's not overriding it in the sense that it's the same entity name, the same symbol within the virtual symbol table. But, right, it's mostly just for, they don't want to call it internal child 3D, so you override the name. It's a new field, a new property, not the same virtual hierarchy. It's a different branch. Same thing here with parent. They didn't want the parent to be of type regular drawable. They wanted it to be of type drawable 3D. So get returning parent here returns this, that's fine. Set, whatever, cool. But if we went into composite drawable, that also has a parent somewhere, probably with drawable. Drawable, I think, has the parent. I can't go to it, though, because it's not in this one anyway. I'll probably end up doing the same thing, and I might be able to explain it better there when I have actual code I can reference. So our composite drawable 3D doesn't use the actual composite drawable thing. If I composite, we'll just use composite drawable as a reference then, because this is what I'm thinking. So a composite doesn't really explain it as much as I would like to. It's me. Dependencies, creator, whatever. This one should have a composite draw node somewhere though, which should tell me what its job is. Draw node is whatever. XML.comments. Yep, C# still uses those. Interface for whatever. Draw nodes, children. Okay, so we still probably want the composite drawable 3D. It's like it's a container in its own right, but it's specifically in 3D space. So maybe it's not exactly what I think it is. We don't want the viewport would be the composite to a flat 2D thing and our interface to the 2D world. So a composite 3D wouldn't do that. I think, yeah, so I think I didn't quite have the right idea. So this composite drawable 3D is just a collection of children. It's very simple. It's not compositing to a 2D texture yet. So they use a composite drawable 3D as the root for a container 3D. And the reason we want a container 3D, what is a container 3D here? Stores drawable 3D, that's fine. Add range, remove, clear. Do I need a difference between a container 3D and a composite drawable 3D? Is this too far? This might be too far. Because this just has a list of children. It has a list of children. It has some lifetime management. It has visibility. It has event handling. I don't know that I need a composite for anything that we're doing right now. I think we'll stick to just having container 3D be our primary thing we're working with here for now. This will need to be a drawable 3D though. And again, that might become an interface. I'll go ahead and make it an interface before I forget to update everything. Add new file, iDrawable 3D. That's an interface, please. Thank you, drawable 3D. Search to the thing. And iDrawable 3D should probably inherit drawable to keep my life simple. This should be in .graphics. And to be fair, C+ or C# reuses a lot of keywords. Like, sure, we have internal and override as keywords, right? Whereas Java, it's an annotation or whatever it's called, and there is no concept of internal. But at least for the concept of here's a new identifier that is not the same virtual identifier, they reuse that. Look up Swift. Swift has a lot. Yeah, so I don't know what to do with an iDrawable 3D just yet, but a drawable 3D should be that. And this is in graphics. I don't know why the namespaces are all wrong. Drawable 3Ds in graphics. We'll look at composite drawable later. iDrawable 3D. We're not implementing anything yet, so that's fine. But I probably want to say it's also a drawable, which if I do, this type or a nested type is a candidate for dependency injection and should be partial. Okay, that's why they use it. Partial, drawable. Okay, so then must come before any interfaces. That's right, I did that backwards. Okay, so now we have a drawable 3D and we'll start overriding things. Did they, in the VR one, do what I did? This is not what I want. Drawable 3D. They made a drawable 3D a composite drawable, which is also probably correct. Transformable, iDrawable, iDisposable, but composite drawable provides us with dependency injection and lifetime management. Perhaps in the future, as component will be the base class of drawable, we could inherit from that. Component, okay. Do we have a thing called component? Host framework graphics, an updatable component that can be inserted into the draw hierarchy. This is currently used as a marker for cases where nothing more than load, update, lifetime support, and hierarchy presence are required. Eventually, this will be fleshed out and the inheritance will be reversed. Drawable to component. Component is a drawable. So that never got done. But it exists. So rather than inheriting drawable immediately, let's inherit component. C++ likes to use reason. Yeah, it does. That's how we got no accept, and requires. Oh boy. Just watching House, and this guy dares to start streaming. Go watch House. I've still never finished House. I'm very close. I think I'm in like halfway through the last season, but I stopped watching like a year or two ago. Very sad. Okay, we haven't even written any actual code yet. We're just trying to figure out what the type hierarchy of this should actually be. which is great. I don't want to overcomplicate the type hierarchy. I don't want to do anything terribly complicated, but I need a handful of things to get started with. Really, all I want is a container that I can put something in with a background color, which I can do without doing 3D, but... House is a piece of shit, smartest doctor in the world. That's about it. That's the whole show. How to abuse your coworkers, take advantage of your position, be an asshole, yeah. But it's fantastic. We might get namespace if the next ADL proposal to accept. Oh, trivially relocatable is a mouthful. Trivially relocatable. It is a mouthful, let me tell you. So okay, other errors we need. Graphics. I need to finish my thought. We were updating namespaces. So new viewport 3D still doesn't work. Container 3D could not be. So the child requiring the ability to be a drawable maybe means that we should not rely on... Okay, so first off, container 3D graphics, which probably then means container 3D being a container 3D being a drawable 3D being a drawable 3D means this should be a drawable in case they actually follow through. But just in case the inheritance does finally get flipped, we still want to be able to assign drawable 3D to drawable for the B. I guess a viewport 3D doesn't need to be a container 3D. It can contain a container 3D. This might actually be, I can probably not note this comment. If I make this a container, not a container, a component, and this framework component, regardless of if the dependency hierarchy gets flipped, the inheritance hierarchy gets flipped, swatch it and not do the things he's done in the show. I mean, you're not gonna regardless, but it's not like it's subtle. It's very overt. If you have to think about it, probably a problem. So drawable 3D. So then container 3D is fine being a drawable 3D, but viewport 3D should not be a container 3D. It should probably be a composite drawable. Straight out of this. Right. A drawable consisting of composite child drawables. No, not a composite drawable, a buffered container of something. Here's the problem. A buffered container of drawable. So if I want a buffered container of non-drawable things, that's a problem. This is the one I was thinking of, by the way, that renders it to an internal frame buffer. So if we have the viewport be a buffered container of something, then we don't have to rewrite much of running to a frame buffer, right? A viewport would be its own frame buffer, and we can reuse a lot of this code, which I think is desirable. But this being a drawable sucks. So, and by sucks, I mean we're just going to come back over to drawable 3D and make it a drawable again. And add another note. Note, drawable 3D drawable is because viewport 3D buffered container drawable 3D. In English, since the viewport 3D class wants to reuse the internal frame buffer already present in the framework, anything it contains must be a drawable. This does not have to be true if instead the viewport 3D contained the buffered container rather than inheriting it. But then we're required to wrap and re-expose a lot of its functionality, probably. And this framework is already a giant inheritance tree, so this wouldn't look strange. At least until component and drawable have their inheritance. In which case, maybe a container contains components. Who knows? Too much for sight. I know. There's my big note, so I don't have to think about it in the future, because I will forget. Hopefully that'll make sense, because if it doesn't, that's the best I can describe it as right now. Get rid of all of my useless namespaces. So buffered container is what our viewport is. Viewport 3D is a buffered container of drawable 3D. Like this. What we really want, though, is yield t, where t drawable 3D to do the os style. So now we have this. And the type hierarchy should not fail to compile. This is not going to change anything visually. Technically, it doesn't change anything semantically either, yet. But our thing still works. So, all of that for not a whole lot of work. 40 minutes in, we've got a class. But I think it does conceptually help to kind of know what we're getting ourselves into here. So now that we have this, we can say drawable 3D, which is still not exactly what the type is, but we can invoke it with something. So all the way up here, we don't have it in place yet. We want a private, don't need this, a private drawable 3D test cube, right? Create cube. So then we can just say invoke test cube, which doesn't exist yet. So children equals new array drawable 3D array, just for shits and giggles. Test cube equals new drawable 3D. This. Sure, that'll work. This should still work. Again, we're not going to see anything, but I just want to make sure we have something. Cool. So the idea is this will eventually become like a primitive shape with a mesh or something, or we have like primitives.cube. So it might not be of type cube, it might still be a drawable 3D. It might be a mesh, a drawable mesh or something. But we're slightly closer now to the actual API for a test cube. Now, viewport 3D. I want to grab another container test again and see what some of them do for their containers. Test container, like let's look at the cursor container, because it put a nice little thing in the screen, in the center of the screen that we could look at. So the container equals container, what's up, hello, is masking true, axes both, center center, size is half. Honestly, that's probably all I give a shit about. So let's steal that shit. It's going to mask off the edges, which shouldn't be a problem with the buffered container. What language is this? This is C sharp. C sharp, which I'm not doing. My glasses are across the room. Relative axes here means its size component is now relative, a percentage basically, of either of these axes, which is by default neither. But with both axes, 0.5 is 50% of both axes. So no matter what we resize the screen to, this will always be half as big as its parent in both directions. It's also anchored to the center, so it will also be centered within its parent. Then the children here that I've got has to be drawable 3D because that's what our viewport says. What I will potentially do is also introduce like well, we won't need a background. If we're going to do something, it should actually probably be like, if I want a background color to render on top of without a fill color option just yet to like test that this is in the correct spot, I want to turn this into a separate container. So like new container, children equals this would have to be, can I do a child again? I forget. Child just exists, okay. So then the reason I would be doing this is because then I can take this container, and then this child would probably only need, this would be 1. It wouldn't matter if it's centered. It wouldn't matter if it's masked, honestly, because the parent is doing the masking. So then I've called it child here. It should probably be children equals new drawable array. And I'm skipping past a lot of my thought processes because this will make more sense as soon as I'm done typing it than if I were to just wait. What I wanted to do was have like a gray background. So I'd want a new like sprite or something. I don't think I can set the background color, right? I can set the color, but there's no like background. So I'd want like sprite, for example, or box, or I think it's a box. Graphics box. And a new box here could have relative size of 1 as well, and color color equals color dot color is color a color for? It's a color info, and a color info has, I believe, color 4s in it, so I could probably say like gray, and that would convert to a color info. And then this. So then I should have a gray background with my viewport on top of the gray background. And if that works, you'll see what I mean. We should have half the test scene is gray. There it is, boom. So this would be our test scene. On top of this should be a viewport of the same size. They're using the exact same sizing here, right? Relative of both, size of 1. So within this space, this half scene space is our current, like, if we put stuff in here, this is where we see it. And then once we've verified that things appear within that space and clip to it, we can then make it as big as the actual viewport if we wanted to put more things in there. Or, right, we could take this container and duplicate it 10 different times for 10 different scenes, right? We don't need just this one all the time. That's basically the proof that I wanted to put out there, is we can already nest this. And while we're not seeing anything in the viewport, it inherits the exact same things that this does, so it should be immediately over the gray background. So if I say like new color 4, this would take... I would love it if it showed me not add step, but the arguments to color for. I assume it's red, green, blue, alpha. So I just do like 0.1f, 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 1.1f. Or alternatively make it fucking white with a 0.1 or something, but I just want to make it a darker color. This should be a darker gray. Cool. That's all I wanted. So now, we have to think about actual work. We've done the type masturbation, at least at the high level. Now we need to figure out what the hell to do. So, our drawable 3D needs... Their drawable 3D comes from composite drawable. Why do we need this? Render stage, invalid render stage. Interesting. We're gonna have to figure out what they need with render stage. Oh, you. Oh, no. I hope we don't end up doing that. Where in the render pipeline this drawable appears? By default, this is none, and it will not be rendered. The valid values of this property depend on the containing scene render pipeline. Right, so they do this because you can have different render pipelines. I guess that's fair, but like that. God, I hate spring. Spring's bad. Is visible. We'll have to figure out calculating is visible, but we're not going to worry about it for a while, hopefully. Subtree visible. So why is it a composite drawable? Why is a drawable 3D? Oh, because it's a composite drawable, not a composite drawable 3D. Why is it a composite drawable? I wonder. Internal set is subtree visible. I really wonder. Okay, so you can do new virtual. This is just a, so again, this is a new alpha, and it's setting base alpha, doing other things. And probably, yeah, the reason this is new and virtual is because you might want to implement transparency differently in a different drawable. So for now, it's implemented as the exact same thing, but you might want to implement it differently and still not rely on the original alpha value or something, I don't know. Because alpha sets color information, which you might not want to actually change with alpha. So that's why you'd have a new virtual thing, which doesn't interfere with the original. Because again, this alpha is going to return an alpha value. Oh, I guess it's not part of the color info. Never mind, I don't know. There's probably a reason. That's probably still the reason, but the tinting, color info, interesting. Does not necessarily, okay, render layer defines a mask that allows us to select which drawables should be rendered. Sure. Most of this we're not going to need for a while. We just want to get a cube on the screen. We'll need a draw node 3D. That's going to do the bulk of the work. A drawable is like all the information that gets passed to the render pipeline. The draw node is in the render tree, the render pipeline, all the information for actually doing the rendering based on the drawable. So a draw node as a source, it has meshes and materials are going to get set here. Yep. Oh boy, we're going to have to do lots of stuff with meshes and materials and shaders and shit. Switch to a 3D context for a renderer. Ooh. Interesting. So they are... So here's another thing I'm going to have to think about, is translating all of this to Veldred's render pipeline, I think. This was written back when they were using exclusively OpenGL, and they've had to change their render pipeline, and they're using Veldred now. Veldred is a programmable render system in C#. Right. It's a... Well, this isn't actually Veldred. If I did Veldred, fucking It's not going to help here. Backend info, it can do direct 3D, it can do metal, OpenGL, Vulkan, all that shit. So anything in here that's relying on OpenGL, I'm going to have to learn how the current render pipeline works in Veldred. Set that up instead. So this will be a lot more work. Switch to a 2D context. So it's going to go to 3D, draw the thing, go back to 2D, and do its work. Which we will probably end up doing. But I don't know. Interesting. Interesting. Weird. So yeah, there's not a whole lot going on here at the moment. How do they do meshes? Because that's, other than the viewport, the mesh is one of the next things we're going to want. And again, I don't exactly know how their viewport even works. Well, like I could go write a camera class, which I probably should still do. But I want to understand more how they've got this integrated into the framework. VR host, that's fine. So like, I mean, the composite visibility test only has 8. So they did a basic model. We could probably do the same thing. I assume that just means render a mesh and nothing fancy, right? So a model of a basic mesh. They have a model, which is a mesh renderer. Okay. That makes enough sense as well. Basic model is up there as a specialization of it. Okay. Set if default standard tint name. Okay, so that comes from the material. Material names unlit has a material material unlit. That's also probably one we'll want. Lots of absorbing into my brain. So they're overriding the new alpha. You change the tint color. Create draw node 3D model draw node. Model draw node is going to inherit the mesh draw node. There's mesh render. Okay. So in order to even get to rendering the cube, we need a camera, we need materials, we need meshes, we need to understand the render pipeline. To get to meshes, we probably don't need much work, right? Just vertex and index information and a way to translate that to Veldred's render pipeline. For materials, we need to shader system, which may or may not exist in the core frame. If I say shader, we're going to get a Veldred shader, probably. Shader. So there's Veldred shader. This shader is framework, whatever, shaders, framework graphics. Okay, so they do have shaders then. So I probably don't need to completely write new shaders. Shaders have uniforms. Shader manager, shader, dummy shader. Art, deferred shader. So a deferred shader, I assume there's no shader code here. I'd probably have to go to either resources or unmanaged. Ooh. So it has to be like a float or an int or something. That's cool. At least I assume, or a struct. That probably just means a struct type, honestly. I've never seen that actually applied here. That's cool. So the deferred renderer is a render pipeline. Oh, there's lots to learn here. We're definitely not going to get that far on this stream, but I wanted to get it started. There's a few projects I want to work on. So I wanted to at least get this started, get my mind churning on it so I didn't get distracted on other things. Veldred shader. So it does take in a Veldred shader, which is probably why it's internal. They don't want to expose Veldred to the public API. So a Veldred shader has shader parts. Shader parts are like the fragment, the vertex, the geometry shader. These are each of the actual shaders, which I assume are Veldred compiled shaders. Device resource encapsulating a single shader module. Yep. Renderer. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to learn a lot of it. Uniform, compiling the shader. Yep. So I guess while we're here then, let's go to, I assume there's a link down here to resources. Okay, so this one. So in OS game resources, shaders. Yeah, I was right. So those are the only shaders they've got, really? Hmm. So position and color vertex shader is probably the only one we give a shit about for the default case, which is just do nothing, which is neat, I guess. And yeah, everything else here is special case. Okay, so we'll end up writing our own additional shaders here. I assume, because these were only a couple years ago, much newer than whatever's going on in this one, the 3D one. So I wonder if they've got shaders as well. I guess I can look at the shaders in here. Do they have shaders? Statistics, physics, Python, math. Hmm. Yeah, they're handling their own shader parts as well. They're doing GL program stuff, yeah. So we're gonna ignore everything they're doing with shader parts, I guess. I don't know where their shader code is, though. Is it a resource? Resources, shaders, there it is. So they have an unlit. We're just going to do unlit shit, which is they have dither stuff. Oh, right. Interesting. Dithering for transparency, yep. Well, that's neat. Unlit vert is exactly what you'd expect it to do. So we're just going to be copying their other shaders for unlit stuff. That'll be fine. Which means I probably need to grab my own copy of OS resources. Assuming at least that OS framework here doesn't have its own shader resources. So, I mean, graphics, shaders, types. Cool. Okay, so that, yeah. So resources probably doesn't exist here because again, they've pulled them all out of the OS resources thing. But I'll check anyway. Resources, there are shaders in here. Okay. There's more shaders. Texture 3D. Ooh, they support 3D textures. Mip mapping, internal. Oh, they can include stuff. That's cool. Fragment output, global uniforms, vertex output. So for just a regular position, that's fine. And then a texture 2D would be a fragment shader then. It still says vertex shader. So there we go. FS for fragment shader. Shader, texture. Cool. Yeah, so it's just wrapping by default. So we're going to end up with shaders like this. So we don't have to go anywhere other than the framework to get our shaders in place. Okay, so we don't have to worry much, if at all, about shaders. Step one, good, great. So we still need to look at meshes and rendering meshes with these shaders. So what is the quickest, easiest way to get a mesh rendering on screen? It's probably just, I mean, need a projection matrix, so we're gonna have to have a camera. Need a view matrix as well. Gonna have to have a camera. We don't have to do much with these shaders, so I'm not gonna worry about the shaders until last minute, probably, right? So long as we can get positions in, the shaders do all their work. Then, how's the camera gonna get the viewport information? How do they structure their camera here? Camera. camera rendering. Okay. So yeah, they've got all sorts of fancy stuff there. Field of view type, Y, X, sure, yeah. Get projection matrix for width and height. So it doesn't really need to depend on anything. You can just pass it in, that's right. So then matrix is the calculated like transform space. So you invert it to get the camera matrix. And then they're also inverting the Z back. Okay, and they've just got different functions for that. I don't know. Yeah, that's why then. Okay, because they're switching on max and min. Shit. Which we currently don't care about, but we might in the future. Switch. So they're just extracting the projection matrix. Near and far plane. Gonna return the matrix when it's done. Are we doing anything else with the matrix? Other than just creating FOVY width over height. For FOVX, they're doing off-center. That's interesting. This field of view is already, yeah, that's going to be a field of view Y, that's why. K, out FOV. Really? Okay, so they're, oh, okay, yep. Right, near plane distance times FOVX over 2. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Target width and target height is near plane distance times whatever's going on here. So, I mean, I don't know why they would even need to do this additional work for, because the only reason this is happening is to compare with width over height. So it's just going to be scaled anyway, or I guess because width, because this is just the ratio, width over height versus whatever. This doesn't affect anything at all. It makes sense up here that it's necessary for calculating like this, but also like it just feels like it's not necessary, or I guess because it's trying to normalize, but it's not a normalized space. I don't know why they're doing that. That's interesting. Maybe because it's your eyeballs, and that's what they're trying to replicate. It's literally in front of your face. It's a VR thing? I don't know. So there's not actually a whole lot to do in camera. It's going to be a drawable 3D. It's going to inherit all of the transformation logic. And you just do a handful of calculations on the matrix. So we could do a camera first. That's not going to give us anything to look at, but we're going to need it to look at things. So fuck it. Camera it is. We're going to start with a camera, and then we'll go look at meshes and materials. Because I just need to do something. Anything at all. Now, where would I put a camera? It's like not graphics, but also like it is graphics. You feel me? I think in this one they put it in graphics rendering. Yeah. So like, do we have any subfolders here that are already good for that? Rendering. We do. Do they have any cameras? No. Add file. Class, camera. And we'll make it, come on. Rendering, graphics, backwards, graphics rendering. Convert to a block thing. Partial, drawable, 3D. Cool. Don't need to use system. They have specified FOV stuff already. It's recalculating the projection matrix every time. It's not being invalidated, which might be worth doing, honestly. But if it's in a function like this, we'd have to also have these parameters be able to invalidate it, which would be difficult. So they're doing FOV type to give us X and Y. I'm not going to go that complicated right now. We're just going to do FOV Y, which is going to look like this, right? Math F exists in system, I guess. It does. Cool. Didn't know that. I mean, I did for newer versions of .NET. I just didn't know they were using it. That's a kind of an old code base, honestly. Why fix formatting? Is it tabs? Oh, it's tabs. Hello. How goes? There we go. Yeah, these are all spaces, but this one was a tab. Interesting. So we can do public matrix 4. OSTK matrix 4, yes. Get projection matrix. It is the projection matrix, right? Yeah, projection matrix. Float with float height. So all we really have to do with the perspective FOV stuff is this. So we can just say, look, var field of view matrix, what we even call it, is matrix 4 dot field of view. Perspective field of view. FOV is Y. Aspect is height over width, right? No, it's width over height for Y. Width over height for Y. The Z near and Z far are near plane distance and far plane distance. And that's it. That's all I have to do. Right? So then we also want var. I mean, what is this used for otherwise? Mat times FOV. So var mat. I guess this is pre-calculating the view and projection together, because this is what this is. The view matrix is this. So I could even then just say, look, public matrix for view matrix would be matrix dot. There's no matrix here. So I think we need to introduce the concept of matrix, because it's a drawable 3D matrix. If not matrix is valid, matrix value equals local matrix. Okay, so we're going to have to introduce matrix stuff, which we can do drawable 3D public matrix for matrix. We're just going to set it to get for right now and not do anything with it so that we have the type and shit available. Inverted returns the new one times create scale. I'll just steal that one even. Fix formatting. And really that's the entire view matrix, right? We don't touch it anywhere else. So then we can return view matrix times field of view matrix. And we could then pretty easily cache this based on the validation logic of the matrix eventually as well. So that's it. That's a camera. Boom. Camera done. Question mark done. There's a few other things, like we might want projecting things and getting directions of things and this field of view stuff. But that's all I need right now for a camera. So let's go figure out this matrix shenanigans. Drawable 3D has a matrix. Where is it getting its matrix information from? There's no matrix space because it's a fucking on-new line. So take me back to my matrix here, because it's in dot transform. Okay, interesting. I don't need to go that hard right now. So dot matrix is going to be like a cached matrix here. Yeah. And a local matrix cache. And then matrix itself is different. So a local matrix is, yeah, based on the parent's matrix. So that's not difficult. We probably need a lot of the same shit. So local matrix cache doesn't have a value, which is interesting. but this one does. I wonder why. I don't know why. So this will also probably involve us adding overrides for scale and shit to the other existing stuff. Origin, scale, rotation, position. Yep, that all makes sense. And then validate it again, which would be the same thing as setting its value to a thing. I'm going to do it this way for both of them, I think. That just makes more sense. So we want private, that's a tab. Private cached. Cached comes from caching. Matrix and local matrix. So then to get matrix, we want get, and there's no set. No set on local matrix, nothing here. We really just want exactly this. We want a lot of formatting fixed. My format? Dope project goal. Yeah, it's gonna be a big one. I still don't know if I'll finish it, but if we can at least get to the point that there's a cube on the screen and I can push those changes and they get accepted by the framework, then somebody else can help. I just want to get the bare minimum done and get it added to here again, like, hey, by the way, I've started porting things over to the new system. Maybe I keep working on it from there, maybe I don't. But getting a cube on the screen, that's goal number one. Commit it, add it to this list here, have somebody's eyes on it. And then that'll be good. So we need a parent. And we need to be able to get local matrix. So public matrix for local matrix. That's a me matrix. We're just going to grab it again, reformat the whole thing. And so if not is valid, right, just like what we're doing here, this will be dot value. So then this dot value equals temp, right? Where does temp otherwise get used? Oh, local matrix like this. Okay. That's where it gets used. It gets used. Format. So now we need an origin, a scale. Okay, so we need an origin, scale, rotation, position. So those are all going to be up here. Private vector 3 origin, position, scale, and then a quaternion rotation. Right. So the identity quaternion, position and scale, or origin and position are 0, scale should be 1, and rotation should be identity. That gives us all the matrices that we need. So now we just need a parent. So private Robble 3D question mark. Also literally question mark. Parent. Which will be null by default. They don't have to be explicit. Because the parent has to also have a matrix. Right. Perfect. So we don't have any way to change these yet, but that's fine. If I said I don't know actually how to. So if I said like override position, there's origin position, for example. Vector 2 drawable origin position. So we probably want to say public new public override to virtual vector3 origin position. Now that it's new, modifiers are not ordered. Okay, what is it supposed to be? What? That's replace origin with methods. No. First of all, does it want it to go here? Here. That's the order they want. Okay. Origin position needs get and set of origin. Right. This. Do they do the same thing? So their origin is a field. Origin is a new public origin. Yep. Try set ref origin value. What is try set for? Because it invalidates a matrix. Okay, that's right. Yeah, we have to invalidate the matrix. Try invalidate matrix. If this, then it does this, and then it does this. Okay. So, sure. Aggressively inline, sure. We do probably want the same logic for each of those fields. So, I mean, format first. How much of this do we want to keep? Method, impl, inline. If we're keeping this, we want to inline it. So we'll do that. Try set. Accessibility modifiers are required. We'll apply them. Ref vector3 field, ref vector3 value. Now, we want that for float. We probably want that for quaternion too. No, I just inlined it for quaternion. Try and validate matrix. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to be consistent and try set ref quaternion and vector3, right? Because up here, oh, I did this in the wrong one. Okay. That's vector3. This one is for quaternion format. And we can also do float. So those are our three things. Let's get them a little bit out of the way here. And down here, probably. If local matrix invalidate, then invalidate this matrix here. Formatting is not going to fix everything. I got rid of most of the tabs, actually, so it did do that. Matrix invalidate, and then invalidate draw node and draw info. That's good. That's fine. So then we have apply set requires remove unused. No, accessibility modifiers, which I can just do manually. So then up here, when we're doing origin position, get is a trivial get, no problem. Set needs to try set ref origin value. That's what it's called, right? Origin is a vector3, value is a vector3. Vector3, vector3. Oh, it's a ref value, that's why. Okay, so that's origin position. Did they use the same naming convention? Question mark. Drawable 3D. Origin. Oh, because it is in transform. Origin. They just called it origin. I don't think there's an origin in drawable. There might be. Origin position is new. Drawable. Drawable. Origin. Oh, anchor. Origin. Okay. That's why they have one called origin position. This one's just called origin. See, I don't need my 3D nodes to have necessarily an origin anchor. It wouldn't hurt in the long run, but it'd have to be a 3D anchor, and it would like not make as much sense. I don't know how you would do it, even, like relative to the bounding box, but you can't see the bounding box. So I don't actually think the origin position, I'm going to probably still call it origin position for consistency. But I think we want to also say, stop. I just want to hit tab. Public override origin. And instead of actually returning what's going on, we can just throw a new exception. Right? Change that however we want in the future. It's just not supported. 3D bullets cannot have an origin anchor, right? That's more documentative of the purpose, at least. Just don't call it. It shouldn't exist in the code. I can't remove the name while I'm inheriting the thing, but just don't do it. So then actual position is not that. Position. Right. So if I said base position does exist. That name makes enough sense. Then we have scale. It's also a vector 3. I think base is it is a vector 2. Okay, good. And then draw scale is different. Relative scaling factor around drawable origin position. Base plus not base. Don't know what the difference is. So for now, we're just going to use scale, and if we need to do both, we'll do both. What does their scale do? They don't have a draw scale, so that's fine. And then I'll probably also add these overloads or these whatevers as well. Then we have, and again, because apparently it's an OS thing, I think we can do this. Scale goes there, position goes here, origin goes here, rotation goes down here. We haven't done anything. So rotation is a quaternion rotation. Okay. Parent is potentially more complicated. Drawable 3D, draw node, right? Because we need to do parent router this. Interesting. Composite drawable 3D parent. That's a fair assumption that it must be a composite. We don't have a composite drawable, though. We have a container 3D. Container 3D parent. Then we do still want this. Everywhere it says this, to do this. Friend comes from, no idea where friend comes from. Where does friend come from? OS framework friend attribute. Well, I mean, we don't have that, so. Interesting. I figured that this would do some kind of child management. Well, I mean, I guess it does, because internal set should only be called from here. So I'll leave that. Basically, you can't set parent. You can only get parent. Okay. Yep. So now we have all of this, the bare minimum to get matrices working. And we could go ahead and X, Y, and Z to each of these things eventually. Not necessary, right? Actually, okay. So we have a drawable. We don't have meshes, we don't have materials, but we have a place for a camera and a place to put them eventually. Let's go ahead and do in graphics, add a new file, model, or a mesh renderer, or I don't know which one yet actually. So they have like a whole hierarchy over here for a mesh renderer before we get to model, which is potentially fine. A 3D drawable with a mesh and material would just be a drawable mesh is probably what I would call that, a drawable mesh. And a model is just a mesh renderer, right? T is a mesh. Which only renders a single mesh. Okay, so a mesh renderer can render multiple meshes, shared mesh data. Where T is a mesh. T mesh. Oh no. But there's only one mesh here. As a material, that's fine. Create 3D. Like, I don't know why there's as many layers here as there are. I'm going to keep it pretty small, probably. So, do we have meshes in here? Mesh, OSTK graphics, these are mesh modes. It doesn't look like we have any concept of a mesh. So that is something we'll have to add. They've put mesh information in graphics meshes. Mesh already doesn't feel like a word. It hasn't even been that long. Feel like a word. Requires a linked attribute. Right, so we're gonna have to do materials as well for meshes and materials with a mesh descriptor. Elements and yeah, recreating a mesh is gonna have to wrap Veldred stuff, which is gonna be interesting. So we could probably do the material actually without having to write a mesh. I'm trying to just like minimize my dependencies on things I need to work on at any one time. So if I looked at material does not inherit from anything. Requires a shader. Needs a store and a descriptor. That's probably fair. We probably need a descriptor as well, but I don't know where it's going to come from. Vertex and uniform attributes, yeah. All right, getting material basically is the bottleneck next. So we could just not build a mesh at all and use a bunch of default values, or not a material rather. We could not support materials and just use colors. Do an unlit shader with only a color and no texture, and figure out how to give it just a shader with no other fanciness. And if that works, we can figure out materials after. That might be worth doing. But I might need to go have lunch. It's 1:30. I haven't eaten all day. Maybe I come back with a stream 2 in an hour or two. But yeah, I think our next steps. Let me go ahead and commit this. Goodness. So we're in create rough hierarchy for a 3D scene. And I should be on the right branch. Yes. So U to origin 3342 3D. Okay, so you can find this work that I'm doing on this branch here, we hopefully, can I associate my work to this? Assignees, projects, development, no branches or pull requests. I don't know how to, I actually don't remember how to do this because I don't want to make a pull request yet. I don't think I can track it without a pull request. Right? If anybody knows GitHub UI better than me, can I associate this branch with this issue without opening a pull request? If not, absolutely no worries. We'll do it later. I can't like edit anything here. I'd have to ask somebody else. If it requires editing these, then it's not going to happen right now. Because I can add a comment. I don't think I can add it. Can I add a branch to the comment? Reference an issue. You can attach files. Let's see here. Markdown, yes, Markdown supported. So I can do. I don't think there's an easy way to do it. I'm not going to close the issue. Definitely not going to do that. I'll figure it out later. Like I said, if we can get to rendering a cube on screen, I'll definitely submit a pull request, and we can start working on this IRL in real time again. Request to audio session. Okay, yeah, I will get going. I might come back and do more of this. Should be possible, right? But like user repo branch. So, oh, not. If I said Nashua OS framework 3342 3D, it's 3342, right? 3D node. Then like, what do I do with this? Is that a link? Work. Do I put it in a comment? Should go get my nails done. They're so short though. I'll wait for them to grow again. Never mind. Right, like I already have a branch though, and I don't think I have the ability to click create a branch because I don't own this repository either. So I can't associate something here myself. I might have to ask them. They might have to make their own branch that I would then like base my fork off of. So if I create a pull request, it'll definitely do that. But I don't want the pull request just yet. So we're just not going to worry about it. When we get to the point where I can pull request, I'll pull request. But yeah, if you want to see what I'm working on, it's here. It's on my GitHub. My GitHub is linked in the description. You're just looking for OS framework. It's the most recently pushed to one. This branch. Have you seen the link? Have you seen the link? The what? What link? Send? You send link where? Sure. Ping. I don't know if you can send it in chat, so if you wanted to just put it in here somewhere. But who's talking in Zozine? Announcements. The video is done. Development. How do I reference an existing branch from an issue in GitHub? Did I... Okay, copy link text. Copy link. Up. Let's say I have a branch named feature 1 and also issue 1. I want to link that branch. So that. Okay. Maybe using the ID of the tree. Again, at this point, if it's too whatever, I'll just do it with a pull request shortly. Right. Not possible for just... Yeah, not possible for just a branch. I'd have to have some other ID for it. And it will automatically happen, again, if I create compare and pull request. I just don't want to say, here's 6 types that I've added to the project. Pull my code. I mean, right. I could create the pull request and say, hey, I'm going to start working on this again. This is where I'm going to start tracking my stuff. But I don't want to do that and then realize that I don't want to work on it again before I get to the point where it works, and then have 6 types added to the pull request, and then 4 years later it's still there. I don't know, right? So that's still my goal. We'll create the pull request and we'll start the discussion back up when we have a cube on the screen. Even if that means we don't have materials yet, if I have a cube on the screen, then I can say, hey, pull request is here. I'll start working on it. You tell me if we want to move it to a different branch, that kind of stuff. We'll go from there. That will be goal. Goal will be that. I might stream more of this later today. I might go hang out with my friends. I might go up to an arcade this weekend. I don't know. But I wanted to at least get this started. You can see why it's kind of complicated. We're retrofitting all this 3D stuff onto a 2D game engine. And while it's gotten better than what the VR version was built on, it's still going to be a little tough to set everything back up. It's not going to be trivial, even though kind of, I mean, like, in the scheme of graphics programming, it's trivial. But, okay. Yeah, I'm going to go eat. I'm going to go do other stuff. Join the Discord if you want to see when I'm going to go live again. Subscribe, any shit like that. Kind of Soding style post announcements. Look, fancy, I made an actual, I haven't made a thumbnail in months. I've just been reusing compiler in C from scratch because all I do is write compilers and they're all in C, so it makes sense. No, OS plus cube. I'm upping my game. I'm learning how to use GIMP. I fucking hate GIMP. I want to get not GIMP on my computer, but oh well. Anyway, I might do this later. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.